One of the things that I want to remind everybody in the room is that Peter Cooper understood money. Fundamentally. He fundamentally understood money. He fundamentally understood how to steward money, and he put it here and he left it for us. And some other people that he knew very well that thought the world of him also left their money here. Andrew Carnegie, Hewitt. They understood money, they gave us money. We are the stewards of Peter Cooper. And George Fox was a great man. I taught the class that he taught for a while. I met the man, I've seen his work. He understood money. And so one of the things I want to remind us all is we have to figure that out. Because if we do not figure that out, we will be no more. And that, for me, is unacceptable. And one of the words somebody used earlier in this session is we're going to try to do something. I would submit to you that we should expunge the word try from this endeavor. Because when you say you're going to try to do something, that means that if you may fail, and that's okay. And as far as I'm concerned, that's not okay. This place must go on. Absolutely. For all the reasons that everybody talked about up here. But I'm telling you right now, if we don't figure the money out and work it out between the administration, us, all the alumni, and all our wallets and the trustees, we will be no more. And I cannot imagine a world in which that happens.
We're running out of time, but I still want to come back to the money issue. I guess if Tom could use it, is it possible for a lot of people feel frustrated when we talk about it, especially since a lot of us didn't go to school to manage money. Is there a way forward in terms of financial?
Oh, whoops. I think there really is, but it really needs several steps. First, and I think the most important one is to get the operating deficit under control. Then I do think, and I'm an optimistic economist in contrast to some folks, I think we want to assume that we can approach small foundations, maybe first and then bigger ones, and say we've got this wonderful program at Cooper and we would appreciate if you can fund 5 students for the next 2 years. And that wouldn't be, master's students, graduate students, that wouldn't be a huge commitment. You kind of build on that and build a circle of friends that goes out. I'm surprised at the number of people I encounter that really don't know about Cooper Union. And they ask, is that in New York? Or whatever. We all know, we're part of it. But we could do much more to make people aware. And I think that's partly why the students thought of Oprah. And then there are bigger questions that have to do with the debt. And that's much trickier and more difficult to deal with, and we have a lot of work to do first.
I actually want to go back to Richard a little bit because, we were talking about how important it is for this ecosystem of student faculty. We're trying to get spending under control. What does that look like for you guys? For all of us.
I came to Cooper Union in 1994, and there was a mini financial crisis shortly after that. And one of the things that concerned me was a cultural aspect about the institution. I've always been of the opinion that if you don't have
resource education. And then it's going to be fun.
Basically, the idea that we can go out to the Middle East and find people with the right suitcase full of money will be a lot. The new push is for online education. I have some long history with that. When I grew up in England, we just started the Open University, and that's proved to be very successful. But I think one of the things that's driving the interest in the United States is the University of Phoenix model, which has lots and lots of money, but probably doesn't serve its students well. So I've spoken for Jamshed about this, and I think one of the things that the point that's being made about the donuts is if we're going to go into some of these schemes, what we must preserve is what the union is, and we mustn't have a situation where the tail is wagging the dog. But from the point of view of expenses, I think it's control.
Before I move on to questions, is there anyone on the panel that has a question of the panelists?
I have a question for John Shedd before we start. I have a question for John Shedd before we start. Where were you yesterday when your students were getting arrested outside?
No.
Hello? Thank you. First, let me say, I am very moved by the comments here. I've come to know many members of the panel and worked with them in various ways. I'm coming to the end of my 9th month at Cooper Union. It has been an interesting time, but I have come to love Cooper Union. I have come to love the students. The students are absolutely the core of our institution, the students today and the students for generations to come. And what I think about every day when I wake up is, how can I make sure that we can preserve the best for our students today and for years to come. Tomorrow morning, bright and early, I'm off to California to meet with donors and, yes, foundations to try to make sure that we can get the support we need for this institution, and to meet with alumni in San Francisco and Silicon Valley and Los Angeles. As I've traveled the country and met with thousands of alumni, I have really gotten to hear the diverse voices who speak in the kinds of fundamentally passionate ways about the Cooper Union experience that we have heard from the panel. And that is what Cooper Union is about, that collection of very special experiences. Sarah, yesterday I was actually participating in a faculty seminar, if you like, of the Humanities and Social Sciences faculty in the engineering building, where we were invited to talk about a topic of our interest, scholarly interest. I talked a little bit about music, and others spoke about other subjects. And when I came out of the building, I saw, because this was the new academic building, I saw that there was somebody at the top of the statue, and I asked our security people for a briefing, and some students said, well, they're asking if you would come there, and I was very, very strongly advise that given the danger present with somebody at the top of the statue, my presence would in fact further endanger the situation. I went home and kept in touch with the reports. I think that we're about to send a communication out about the arrests. I haven't seen the video yet. TC has, and found them very disturbing. And I'll be trying to get in touch with the head of the police of the force involved. Our staff is trying to get us the contact information to express my concern about the treatment. So yes, we will be there to support our students. And I protested myself against investments in South Africa when I was a student. I think that the passions are absolutely key to your education and your development. And I welcome the diverse opinions and the protests as well. Thank you.
John, do you want to take an opportunity to ask a question of the panel?
I mean, I don't really have a lot of questions right now. I will certainly look at your document, and I think we can use all the good ideas we can get. From some of what I've heard, I think there are lots and lots of good ideas we certainly share. I think that on the deficit issue, you know, I find myself actually being the only person who, when the money runs out, has to actually pay, make sure that the bills get paid. And that's a daunting position to be in. And I would simply ask if you would think about being in that position. The deficit is not what I would want to be choosing to talk about. You know, I'm a teacher and an educator, and I've spent my life as one, and a scholar. But we have as John Leeper mentioned, a very, very serious problem, and I don't think that in 1994 the financial problem was slight. One of the things that I did in my quick read of portions of the document, see was a section on how we have to manage our finances conservatively because we have to steward our endowment for the future. Well, if you actually frame the finances in ways that actually have not been framed before at Cooper Union, but in a way that's necessary in order to preserve our resources for the future and to survive. And if you calculate backwards what that means for the last 20 years, Cooper Union was in a very serious deficit since 1991. It was not in control, absolutely. Was that Richard, I think, who said it was not in control in 91, 92, 94, 95, not in any time in the last 20 years. There was an illusion of control because the stock markets soared in some of those years. And so the question that I would ask of you in the panel is, if you were to advise me, if you were in my shoes and saw our unrestricted endowment about to collapse in a few years, what would you advise me to do?
Thank you. Anyone want to answer?
To go back to the issue of language, and I think there is a connection between language and finances here. If you look at, to go back to the question of language, and I think there is an immediate connection between language and finances. If you look at the language put forward by the Development Office on the website about what we are as an institution, you would see that we are a regular small college. There is nothing about the benefits there of, or the merits of having an all-tuition policy. In other words, no one is willing to articulate this internally. And until we do, how can we persuade even the alumni to give?
You know, Jamshed, when I met with you, and I thank you for that opportunity, you made a very interesting distinction about how alumni can help in today's world that's very different from the past. And one of the things that you said is volunteers, for instance, in the past were essentially kind of envelope stuffers. And that given the resources available of the Cooper Union in terms of their alumni, in terms of knowledge and understanding and expertise, that perhaps the best use of some volunteers would be to actually lend their time and their expertise to the university. And I'll stand up and say that I think that one of my expertise is fiscal governance. Because in my business, if I don't mind the money, not only am I out of a job, the project fails and the company possibly goes under. So I'm saying to you, Jamshed, I am available to you to do whatever it helps, whatever is necessary to get to sound fiscal governance. Because I agree with Richard. Fundamentally, if we do not understand what our costs are and what our revenues are and actually keep track of it ongoingly all the time, like it's the most important thing that we can do, and it's truly an ontology, we're sunk. And I'm sure there are plenty of other alumni who would also be willing to do that. And I think that if we were to parse up the tasks and really get down to the what, by when, by who, and to get to finding specific measurable results, so that, for instance, Richard Stock, Peter Buckley, Toby can say, we're on top of this. Because I agree completely with what Peter said, because one of the problems that I have is I want to be able to go out for you and make the ask. But right now, I can't go out and make the ask. And the reason why I can't go out and make the ask is because we don't know how the money was stewarded. We fundamentally do not. And somebody up here referred to that transparency as used in processes and conversation has variable meaning. And I get that. But I don't think there's any doubt that there needs to be more transparency in terms of our process. And I think fundamentally we have to, so that you are able to put out documents which are not opaque, which protect the interests that have to be protected, but which tell us where we are in terms of cash and where we are in terms of endowment and in terms of measuring and giving a report card and how we're doing as stewards. And I think that we need to figure that out, because until we have confidence ourselves and can enroll others that we're taking care of this place, people are going to hang on to their money. Because I, for one, don't want to see it peed away. But at the same time, I don't want to lose Cooper. So I think we need to get on this with more than alacrity.
On that issue, I would just like to, if you would W.E. Boys quote, everybody including myself, is that the remedy for an invisible injustice always seems, an invisible wrong always seems unjust. And if it were visible what was going on, then we could unify. The whole internal community could unify in a way won't all be behind every element of it, but we can be proud that that happened. And it happened because we as a community came together and wanted it to happen. And that does need that transparency.
I mean, it's obvious. I mean, there's no larger asset than the truth, and it immediately, you know, evaporates the minute you try to even bend it a little. I'm talking about language. I'm talking about the way in which we put forward our missteps. We made serious missteps. And we, you know, got caught up. And I'm talking about the last 12 years. I'm not talking about the last 40. I know all about the last 40 years and the last 60. If you have a $170 million building and you have a $175 million loan, you know, sure, 10% of it, 20% of it, 18.5% of it was for other things. But in the end, you know, putting that forward and saying, oh my God, what did we do? What was our responsibility? And how did we all of a sudden decide that we're supposed to be a cutting edge place? This is an ethical place. And it's about ethics and imagination. And restoring the credibility to that, in my view, is our only way to restore our credit and our books. The books are linked to our credibility. And transferring the load to students for whatever, you know, little bit in the beginning, you know, whatever it is, that transference of load is, in my view, a bending of that truth. It's a further diminishing of the credibility of the place. Our largest credibility is that we've done this 150-year thick wall around this place. I don't believe that degree distinctions are, you know, they're fairly flimsy next to a 150-year thick wall. You can't tell me that somehow that's going to preserve, right, distinctions between degrees, and that has no chance relative to the forces of capital that we're dealing with.
I want to go to Toby after the TM1, because it's actually coming back to your
Just quickly, if you ask me that question, Jamshed, I as an engineer say to you that what I understand, we're spending $60 million a year, which means a Cooper education is more than $60,000 a year. It must be one of the most expensive schools in the country. Well, those are the numbers, 60 million. And then from what, I don't know many numbers, the other number that I've heard is that the engineering school budget is 6 million. And I'm sure that doesn't include a lot of, you know, bits and pieces of plant. But the engineering school is responsible for 50% of the students, and yet we're responsible for 1/10 of a budget. And, you know, if we're going to move forwards out of this, I repeat my earlier statement that big questions have to be asked, and everybody's asking on this table, and I ask, who do we trust? Do we trust the trustees that put us in the hole in the first place? The trustees that told us that we had to build the new building which is now the millstone around our neck? I think we need a new set of trustees.
So this was the one question that I asked in the fall. It was in, I forget when that community meeting was, this place was packed. It was like either in October or November, and I asked a single question to the chairman of the Board of Trustees, and that was, if there is a paradigmatic divide between the people that represent this institution, the faculty members, the student, and the alumni, and then the very small body of the Board of Trustees and maybe some of the administrators, and if those two bodies disagree, does the community have recourse to dissolve the body of the Board of Trustees and establish a new body? And nobody knew, actually, the answer to that legally or really just very pragmatically. Like, if it is true that you guys do not want to be led anymore by a group of people that maybe don't have the vision that you have, including all the people on this faculty, what are your legal recourses? I think it's like really important to know that right up front. You may have none. And then that point is a great one, and also one that's not worth mentioning because you don't have any legal recourse, right? If you do have legal recourse, why it's 3 months later and you're still trying to operate with the same group of people that doesn't seem to actually be able to have the same vision that you have? I'm confused. Like, that seems really troubling. In addition to it, I think that the idea actually that it strikes me as really odd that the one solution that has been put forward that's really tangible is the solution of a tuition-based model, right? Either for undergrads or graduate programs, whatever. It's the one solution that we already have tens of millions of different examples of failure, right? We are all kinds of schools that charge tuition are in financial straits, right? So it's confusing to me that that would be the one like tangible solution. Actually, I'm sorry, is your name Sangu? I thought that Sangu was that was the only other tangible actual thing that I heard anybody say that we could actually do, right? And is this notion of growing down, which I think is really essential. What does it look like for a Cooper Union community to actually like go outside into the East Village where you belong and let it be known that you're here to serve your community? If you can do that, your community will fight for you. It happens all over. If you look at schools in Bed-Stuy, the community gets together and figures out how to make that school survive. Why? Because the school serves its community. That strikes me as like really essential and really something that seems to be worth a lot more energy than it's getting right now. The second thing is that everyone's talking about generating revenue. And the finances are really opaque, but I was able to find a lot of stuff on the internet on the 990s. You can see all of the, like, whatever Cooper is required to report to the US government every single year in its 990 tax form is public record. You look up Cooper Union 990 and you see it. And one of the things that they're required to put forward are the 10 highest paid officers in the school. And I would just ask, like, what does it cost to educate someone? How much does your education cost when you go through Cooper? Because I'll tell you what, I'm one of the teachers here, and I don't make no money, so it's not coming to me. I'm dead serious. And neither is it coming to any of the tenured faculty members. Make no mistake, there's no wealth on this panel. There really isn't. It's a mistake. And actually, sadly, if you can afford to be an adjunct at this school and 70% of your classes are taught by adjuncts, it means that somewhere else you're getting money from somewhere else, right? So if you don't have a trust or if you don't have another source of income, I can't afford to be a teacher here. I don't have another source of income. I was trained to do one thing and I'm not able to do it. So it strikes me as really important to not talk about so much where we can generate more revenue until you can figure out what your operational costs actually are, because they seem really skewed and not necessarily instructional cost, or even what it takes to run different buildings, including the big new one. There are a lot of costs that seem to me really excessive. And sure, you'll hear that they follow similar patterns to other universities, but you're not like other universities. And it seems like you have an opportunity here, now, in this moment, to like think bigger than that and to maybe reimagine the entire way that education at the higher level works. What if you guys could come up with a model that then other schools followed? I would work towards that kind of an imagination and not one that says like, well, I don't know, we'll try to do some tuition thing, even though we see it failing all around us anyway. That doesn't make any sense. It's like...
That's the point. Is this room, that's the meaning of this room. This, you know, there's an endless story of, you know, massive crisis and injustice that can be reinvented and reimagined and rebuilt through actions taken. And here we are. We have a massive student loan debt crisis. We have unbelievable crisis in high schools and lower education. You know, this artificial barrier of 18, all of a sudden you're 18 and then, you know, you have to be a millionaire to go to college or you get these huge debt. or in high school, you know, the situation is such a mess. If you start looking at it vertically, there is enormous room for invention. And that's what this room is for. And it's what has happened for 150 years. So why would we take the off-the-shelf answer? It makes no sense.
With regards to what Toby was talking about with the Board of Trustees, and this is something that we've discussed before, I have to disagree with you. I think that by the time we get over the drama of expelling the Board of Trustees and finding some other group of people with their expertise, we'll be upstream without a paddle, and it'll be too late. I think we have to figure out how to work with them and how to work with the administration. There shall be no guillotines at Cooper. Only after we stop looking to cut off heads will the administration actually open up.
There needs to be more authorship.
I'm sorry?
There needs to be more authorship in the Board of Trustees.
I disagree entirely with your whole statement. I think
You're an appeasement.
we're going to have moments for questions.
This is I guess this whole tract of discussion here started as suggestions to the president, because it was following his questions. I would recommend not using the newspapers as a format to communicate to the students and faculty. Refraining from the phrase silent majority. I believe it was in the Wall Street Journal. You were quoted as saying there is a silent but supportive majority.
Very strong.
At any rate, I'd like to know if this silent majority, considering they're so enthusiastic, have they made a website? Have they protested? Have they shown up at the school? Are they here? Are they in this room? Are they participating?
Wait, who are the silent majority?
We don't know. Because they're silent. I would suggest, because saying that there is a silent majority somewhere suggests that this is a minority. This is not a minority. This is a collective group. So that would be my recommendation.
What's the name of the student who just talked? What's the name of the student who just talked?
We have a question from the floor. There's a mic over here. Please come up to the mic.
I thought Andrew Leader had a good point. We need whether we get rid of our trustees or not, we need to do something yesterday, ideally last year or 5 years ago. So really briefly, anybody who on the panel has a sense of what we do tomorrow when we wake up, or the next time we have time to think about Cooper Union and how to save it, what is the next step after this?
And the next question, let's put two questions together.
No, that's. I already. If I had another question, I already forgot it. So what are the next steps? Not the next step in general, but the next step tomorrow.
Can I answer that? Just like the beginning. So I think that the question of the Board of Trustees thing is actually a legal one. It's so we can bandy it around. You can bandy it around emotionally as much as you want, but it's a legal question. It's something that, as the community, you should know whether or not you have any recourse. You may not. In that case, you have to work, right? But you should know, and that's something that you ask. I don't know, a lawyer or the chairman of the Board of Trustees should know that kind of thing, but he didn't when I asked in November. So The second thing, to go to Carrie's question, I was thinking today as I was coming here, because I was like, I should be able to imagine how something could actually change, what people could actually do. And again, I think that Sangu's the beginning of that kind of solution. Like, what if tomorrow Cooper opened its doors and was like, we're going to do tutoring here every day after school from 4 until 6. It doesn't generate revenue, but your community will fight for you if you do that kind of thing. What if all of the roof space on all of your different buildings starts community agriculture projects, or the engineers figure out how you guys could support enough soil that you could start a CSA? Sounds kind of weird and hippie-ish, but your community will get involved. Like, people in this city will get involved for you if you begin to open up a little bit. I also think that it's really important for the school to represent a little more evenly the demographic of the city. That's historically, at least in my experience, and I haven't taught here since 2010 or 2010, is like really underserved communities in this city are not represented at Cooper. And that makes it a hard thing to argue to a city that you get public funds to essentially be a private university. I don't know. Those kinds of things, like just as like really, I mean, little things that don't generate revenue, but that until you have a sense of operational costs, so that everything is on the table, and I think everybody here would love to have that happen, and that the same sentiment, unfortunately, was overly expressed also in November, and it doesn't seem like much has changed, which is why it seems like an important thing to look at your legal recourses. But
by the way, that was Kerry Carnahan, who's a poet and likes to be very self-effacing, but has been excellent, well known to everyone on this panel, as well as in the And I'm Barry Drogan from the publisher of the Alumni Pioneer, and one of its lead reporters. And what a reporter really does is listen. I do a lot of listening to everyone. There's a lot of people on this panel who have written really amazing things that I've been able to read and to try to pass on to other people. And there's things. And then there are just a few people on this panel who I've kind of known about, but I haven't quite yet gotten to know. And one of the most extraordinary things I heard tonight, which really makes me want to know more about Toby Cumberbatch, when he made a statement about, and I've been learning more and more about him, and the things he does in bringing people out to Africa and these kind of stuff. And I think he has a really profound understanding of how education can occur does not require a huge monetary environment in order for it to happen. And I think there's kind of and I'm wondering whether the panel agrees that there's kind of a swelling behind that there was a statement made about, we are not wealthy people up here, and questioning. I've been involved as part of listening. I also read a lot and read behind the lines and get people to tell me things, and there's a lot we know about where an awful lot of the money that is coming in is actually going. But I want to know what the panel's sense is on whether they feel that Cooper Union needs more money, which is the whole revenue way of speaking about things, or whether it will be possible to preserve education, preserve free education, and preserve the excellence that you all talked about what Cooper's about, within an environment where people are thinking more about austerity and doing more with less, because Toby made this wonderful statement about that, about operating within, that sometimes having less money.
Toby, do you want to respond to that? Or do you mind to say that?
Well, I'd like to say that, what are we doing now, or what should we have done yesterday? Of course, cuts were announced basically 2 weeks ago, where the operating budget of the school will indeed be cut. In humanities, I know we will be cut, 12.5%. Now, that means, to answer Barry's question, that there's no such thing as cutting fat anymore. I mean, we are an incredibly slimmed down educational unit, and I'm sure other of the faculties will feel the same way. And Jamshed has pledged that the cuts will even be deeper within the administration. But that leads to kind of a secondary question, that is that these cuts were done on the fly. I mean, they were done not particularly quickly and not particularly fairly, more fairly than ever before perhaps. But there's no process at Cooper Union actually, as I know, where the deans and the, look across at each other and actually talk meaningfully about how any of our resources are allocated across the board. That is, everything is still basically set at 15 years ago. And if you look at the costs of the academic units, they've been going up pretty much, there's no rhyme or reason. There's no such thing as planning at Cooper, and hasn't been for many years.
Well, very quickly, when I first came, I certainly felt on a level playing field. We didn't have huge resources, but that didn't really matter because you felt that everybody else was in the same place. Now, it's different. You think, the academic slice of the pie is smaller. But to go back to another question, what do you need to educate? I think one of the things that endeared me to Cooper when I came was that we didn't really have much, but people had incredible imagination, so they made a lot go a long way.
I'd like to answer Carrie's question, because I thought it was actually an excellent question. So what do I think are steps we should take tomorrow? I'd say 5 things. 1, I'd like to know as much as possible, what was the cash budget for last year? What is the austerity budget going to be? What was the investment performance as number 3? 4, what are the investment guidelines? And 5, publish the Policies and Procedures Manual for Fiscal Governance. I'd like to see those 5. And I think if we had those, it would go a long way.
I'm Erin Stange in Humanities. Going back to the trustees, I think there are things that can be done short of the guillotine. I studied the charter for the trustees a few months ago, and it's not clear to me that the Board of Trustees is even constituted in accord with its own charter for various reasons, the idea that we have. And I think that's a shame. We could also insist strongly that they come and visit our classes, see what we do in the classroom. I mean, I'm not just off the top of my head, but just to bring them a little closer to us. And I also feel that any other kind of constitutive body that we have, such as the so-called Faculty Student Senate, be much more open. I think we should have Faculty Student Senate open meetings on a regular basis. There now is a website, but there should be a better way of disseminating what goes on in that mysterious body. And I think there's got to be some way of addressing the alienation that the 70% of the faculty that are part-time, mostly adjunct, feel. And there are a number of sort of tactical, there are a number of obstacles to that set up bureaucratically, but I think we could figure out how to overcome those. There's a huge pool of imagination and ideas and energy that feels that nobody could care less about them. And also, maybe, and this I just happened to think of, is maybe Jamshed could ask other people in the administration if they might consider pledging 5% of their salaries to Cooper Union. And just have these things out there to be, you know, so that we could walk up to people in development and say, well, did you give your 5% or not? You know? Just to keep as many things like that on the table and keep the conversations going. We have groups and we have connections, but they're not functioning as well as they could be. Thanks.
Just one thing, sort of in response to that and in response to Carrie's question and this notion of sort of more communication with the Board of Trustees and in terms of next steps, I think we can go back even to the charter of the school. I think there's one thing in there that we haven't fulfilled. When the school was started, there was a number of things: Free Night School of Instruction, the Female School of Design, a public reading room, but there was also this thing called the Associates of Cooper Union that was one of the things that Peter Cooper wanted for the school. And that was a broad body that included alumni, but it also included civic organizations, professional societies. And just in my preliminary research on this, it seemed the first few decades, the board really wanted to implement this and it never came into fruition, but there's a great amount of potential for both revenue generation and community building if there is this body, and it seems, and I'm not a lawyer, from reading the charter that this body has some responsibilities and privileges with respect to removing a trustee member, with filling a seat if possible, and also there's a mechanism to provide recommendations to the Board of Trustees, which they can consider. So I think that potentially is a start. You know, it's Peter Cooper's last wish for the school.
Hi, I'm Robert Schill, Architecture 1981. I have a question about alumni fundraising, but I want to start just by saying there's an intellectual crisis in Ivy League schools, and that is they've been focusing more and more on business programs, and that's been great in that they've turned out tens of thousands of investment bankers and hedge fund traders, all of whom, or many of whom, tens of thousands of whom make like multi-million-dollar bonuses every year, regardless of how the economy is going, regardless of how many people are unemployed, they still get that money. And those Ivy League schools can turn to them when they make a mistake. So, like for instance, MIT is an Ivy League, but when MIT built, it's in the same situation. When they started to build, they had alumni they could fall back on. Cooper Union has never had that type of alumni. There may be a few graduates of Cooper Union who've done very well, probably none at that level. When I was in school, our biggest donor was a very successful graphic artist, right? There's no comparison between the amount of money he could donate and the amount of money one hedge fund trader could donate. So my question is, how realistic is it to think that you're going to make up this deficit and sort of float that millstone, right, with money you raise from alumni? And I think it's a really serious question. I know as a trustee, the job of the trustees is to deal with reality, and I think this is one of the realities you have to deal with.
Can you come back to the mic for a second? What, can you just repeat that last segment? Did you say that?
Well, no, I'm just saying that I've heard this. There's been a lot of this. There's been some discussion about raising. There's a very serious problem. There's a very serious financial problem that has to do with spending an obscene amount of money in a way that was totally contradictory to everything that Peter Cooper ever did in his life to build a building like that, right? So it's a big mistake made by an institution. That's done. There's very little you can do about that. So I'm just saying that you'll have to find other ways of raising money. And what are the other ways of raising money? And is it really realistic to think that you can raise that much money from Cooper's alumni?
Cooper's alumni can never raise that amount of money. I mean, they could if they went power on that thought, but they can never do that. The alumni should not be expended to plumb that deficit. That's not happening. That's not what we're talking about here. We're
And I guess I'm really commenting on the realism of expecting them to, of thinking that's a path, because I think you really have to find other donors and bigger donors. And a lot of that has to do with, like, basically broadening people's knowledge of Cooper Union in the community and the city.
I have something to say actually to that point. I'm kind of a booster personality. And I would just like to highlight the way that alumni do support the school in a number of ways that are not measured right now, and that I think that the Alumni Association or the Associates of Cooper should measure and highlight. Right now, as Tom said previously, many people do not know what Cooper Union is. The alumni are the best and only advertisement for Cooper Union that exists right now. The students do an excellent job. I mean, TEDx was incredible. But when you look at who is advertising Cooper Union, it's us, because we put it on our CVs, we put it on our resumes, we put it on our artist bios. When you look at the people internally at Cooper Union that are giving back to the school, if we were to do a market rate analysis of the amount of money Cooper Union could be spending on that 70% of adjuncts that are alumni, that is a tremendous donation to the university that we do not keep track of right now. If you were to track the volunteer hours that the Alumni Association gives and that other volunteers give through lecturing students as guest lecturers, through participating in lunch and learns, they come in and they give students ideas about their resumes, free workshops, crits. I mean, there's a lot of things that alumni are doing right now that we're not writing down. And I think it's important that we highlight that, because alumni are giving back to the student and to the students and to the community in a myriad of ways that we are not able to quantify. And we should be highlighting that to our other donation opportunities. We should be sharing with them how dedicated the alumni are to the school. There's not just one number. There's not just a percentage of donors that we should be sharing with our philanthropic opportunities. We should be saying, look at all of these people that are giving back in these unquantifiable ways. I'll try to quantify them for you, and maybe you'll get an idea of how great this support is that the alumni give.
Yes.
As far as the TEDx is concerned, the way that it was oriented, me attending to National Professor of Engineering, she's a TED fellow. And Loveliness, yeah. She approached me for Sean Cusack, so there were a lot of dreams there. And Sean Cusack asked if, for some account direct TEDx. We went to TED, you guys are familiar. You guys know TED, right? TED didn't know about the union. They didn't know. I had to tell them what this school was about. And once I told them, they were converts. They love us. Yeah. To talk about getting people to support the school, in order, because I'm a filmmaker and I don't think this is good, I went to one of the leading HD camera rental houses in the city and had a conversation with them about what we do. They gave me $8,000 camera package for the day, for free. So there are ways once you convert people and go to them. We have an ability as alumni to speak about the school that no one else does. And I think that is the power that we have when we talk about finding. I didn't have to ask permission from anyone. I asked the school after the fact. I told them, oh, I got a camera package, don't worry about it. That's what we can do. And I think that that's an example of alumni doing right now. So.
There was a call to get the skunk out on the table, and I just wanted to help you with that skunk. I have some skunk experience. And I also wanted to agree wholeheartedly, Toby, I think that tuition in any form is the wrong direction. I think it's important to reiterate that this is not a tuition problem. Cooper Union had a totally sustainable free tuition model for over 100 years. And that's not why we have a crisis. We have a crisis because there was a concerted effort. This isn't an accident. We're not here by accident. We're here by plan. There was a radical agenda, a radical expansionist agenda that thought it would be a good idea to borrow $200 million to put towards expansion of the school by using real estate and financial market speculation. It didn't work very well. Maybe we don't need the guillotine to fix the problem. We did look into how to remove the Board of Trustees. Unfortunately, legally, the only recourse we have is the trust of the school, which is overseen, I think, by the Attorney General of New York State. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a good idea. That's a big guillotine. You don't want to get the Attorney General of New York State in just because you don't like the trustees who made a really bad $200 million mistake. It's a big mistake, but that's a really big guillotine. I think the reason I'm bringing it up now is twofold. One reason we need to shine a light on what was done and by who and when and why is because we will not get any investment in the school until we clean up our books. We have to put our fiscal house in order. I would invite everybody to look at Reuters. There's an article called Why Cooper Union Can't Be Trusted, where they talk about why anybody with sense wouldn't give money to an institution that just lost $200 million that can't tell you how, when, why, what, where. The second reason I bring it up now, in light of these new proposals, if we're going to expand the school so that we're going to be teaching grad school and other money-making teaching opportunities, we're talking about continuing the expansion of the school so that we can continue to speculate in a new market. We're talking about speculating in the education market, which is the last bubble that hasn't popped. Real estate, we did it, popped, we lost the money. Financial markets, we did it, popped, lost the money. All we have to do now is invest in the education bubble, and then we've got all three and we've lost everything.